All right, thank you very much for attending. This is Security 314, actually, not 312. 314 for the evaluation, always very important. It's customer perspectives on implementing security controls with AWS. My name is Mark Nunnekov, and I'm the Vice President for Cloud and Emerging Technologies at Trend Micro. Obviously, with customer perspectives, we have customers. Always a good thing. So let's do a little bit of introductions. So this is Jason Craddock, the VP of Information Systems at Wilbrow's Group Incorporated. To his left, we have Mark Burns, the Enterprise Security Manager for Medibank in Australia. We've done a little flipperoo here. And next we have Aaron Hughes, who's the Systems Architect for Washington State Department of Fish and Wildlife. And on the end, we have Mauricio Fernandes, who's the President of Daedalus Prime from Brazil. So a very diverse panel, a lot of practical expertise of deploying real-world workflows in AWS, and very diverse set of security requirements and regulatory challenges. So we're going to dive into that in this discussion, in this session. So what our main question of our discussion today is, what does the shared responsibility security model look like in the real world? So when you look into the AWS documentation and you hear their presentations, they explain that there's this thing called the shared responsibility model. And it looks like this. So a real quick introduction to it. Everything on the left-hand side is what AWS takes care of for security responsibilities. So they handle the security of the facilities, all the physical aspects, so the cabling, all the network aspects, as well as the virtualization layer. But that leaves everything on the right for you, the users of AWS, to take care of. So we need to secure the operating systems, the applications, the data, and then configure various AWS services like IAM and security groups and VPCs, things along those lines. So the question that we're going to pose to the panel, and we're going to discuss in depth and come at it from a couple different angles, is how does this model work in the real world? It's very simple. It's nice to explain on a slide. But as we all know, sort of the best laid plans kind of go out the window as soon as you start deploying code and running production workloads. So that's what we're going to dive into. But first, we're going to get to know our panelists a little bit better. So Jason, why don't you kick us off with a little bit of an intro here?
Yeah, thank you, Mark. My name's Jason Craddock. I'm, again, VP of IS for Wilbrow's Group. We build energy assets, so pipelines, power lines, things like that. So we've built those for over 100 years. We've built some of the biggest and baddest pipelines around the world. And we're that construction company. It's what we've done forever. But we've sort of said, you know what, we need to change the way we look at just being a construction company. Eventually, you're going to run out of things to build, right? So we've said, we need to push into the digital age and look at how we can help our customers manage their energy assets. So we built this product called IntegraLink, and we're out there helping our customers visualize their assets in ways they never thought was possible, right? It was always stuck in this GIS system and on-premise. We've heard the story in all the keynotes, right? Monolithic, big data, stuck in a SAN on your on-premise. And we said we want to enable it and kind of make this Yelp for pipeline, right? So you can just find out where's that asset at, like the valve or the compressor station, and how long ago was it inspected? What's the preventative maintenance we need to look at? And start to just look at your assets instead of building these giant GIS systems. Really, just start to look at the data and let our customers, ask questions about it.
Fantastic, excellent. All right, so our next panelist, Mark Burns. Why don't you introduce yourself a little bit, Mark?
Hi, I'm Mark Burns. As Mark mentioned, flew over from Australia earlier this week. Medibank is a federally government-owned private health insurance company. We're currently going through IPO, so the government is selling us off. We're not allowed to talk about it, so I'll just keep going. So from a Amazon point of view, we're looking to move a lot of our web-facing applications across to Amazon. Being able to leverage off Amazon to really decrease the time it takes for us to bring up applications within Amazon. And from a security point of view, it's also been a great opportunity for us to be able to build in strong security controls from ground up. We don't get that opportunity very often. Normally it's a brown field, usually a brown smelling field. But for us now, it's been great to be involved in the project from the ground up, working with our partners such as Trend to then implement security from the ground up. So.
Excellent, right on. Okay, I'm just going to do a little slide magic here so we can go in order. Didn't mean to throw you a curveball already, Mauricio. So Aaron, why don't you introduce yourself to the group?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Aaron Hughes with Washington Department of Fish and Wildlife. I work for the infrastructure services team. I lead a team of individuals responsible for managing our server, storage, and virtualization environments, both on premises and in the cloud. A few years ago, one of our wildlife biologists, on his own, he's also actually an IT specialist. He kind of crosses the border between IT and biology. He implemented an environment that allowed for the collection of citizen science data, so citizens could actually be trained by biologists to collect information on wildlife and the ecosystems they live in by using devices such as their smartphone. By basically they can enable the location tagging, take pictures of different type of wildlife species, and upload that into an environment that we could then vet or cleanse before we bring it back into our internal environment. So I assisted him with that process as far as deploying that environment. And earlier this year, he really wanted to expand that environment and add additional services. And those services included capturing information as far as species that have sensitive data or protective species. So we had to go through a bit of an overhaul in the way that we manage that environment on the outside. We actually implemented a new both development and production environment consisting of several reserved instances running in a VPC. So it was a challenge because we hadn't done that before, and we had to look for new tools to do that and meet state security requirements. But it was great. It's been successful so far.
Excellent. Thank you. We'll just go back one. And Mauricio, can you introduce yourself, please?
Okay. Well, my name is Mauricio Fernandes. I'm from AWS, Brazilian company. And we are a premier partner of Amazon. We are very proud to be working with them for a long time, for 5 years actually. And we do manage services and consulting services for Brazilian companies. This is the short story. The long story is that we are 25 years in the market, since 1989. And we used to run a local data center with more than 2,000 servers. That was our nightmare. So we sold the nightmare and started with Amazon. And then we use all our experience to help those guys to, migrate and do the journey to the cloud, as Amazon usually say. And then we realized that, we don't have a solution for security. You know that all the time on cloud computing. What matters is volume. You have to manage volume. So it's one thing to have one server with, some security procedures, but when you have 4,000 CPUs like us, it's totally different. I mean, you have to automate. That's why we started with Trend Micro. So today at Daedalus, we are growing fast. We are one of the fast-growing companies in Brazil. We are leading the cloud computing ideal in Brazil and in Latin, I would say. And Trend Micro is one of the major achievements for us to understand and to help the customers with security services. Security as a service. That's what we are talking here.
Great, fantastic. So as you guys can tell, we've got a pretty diverse set of experience up here, right? And that's what was the goal of this panel, to give you a balance and a view from all around the world, as well as in many different verticals. So let's dive in and find out how the shared responsibility model works in the real world. So our first question, and I'll start with you, Jason, if that's okay with you. No, I'm not going to give you a choice to say no. So what objections were raised by your security team?
It's interesting. It's in Texas, right? Energy, oil and gas. We're in Texas, and initially the response was like, whoa, no way, Bucko. You can't do it, right? And I remember going, whoa, why? What's the deal? And the thought was that, well, it's cloud, not allowed, right? It's the Wild West out there. You can't protect it. And initially, it was just this. I think as security professionals, we've all seen this where. It's more about the perceived lack of security rather than the factual, objective kind of looking at it. And as we started to go down that trail of like, let's just understand, why are you so afraid? What's the problem? We started to really find out that it's really just not that different, right? You still have an ACL, it's not on a Cisco or like an ASA or a checkpoint. It's now on a security group, right? So. Originally, it was just the perception, That was our only problem, was this perception of insecurity and not really an objective one.
Okay. All right, and I see Aaron nodding as Jason was explaining things. So, dealing with your different data sets, so with scientific data and, government regulation and sort of that traditional government mindset when it comes to anything, how was your experience?
Well, the experience, it was a good experience. It was definitely a learning experience. We basically, when we had to work with Central IT, the division for Central IT for State of Washington, CTS, and to go through a security design review, which was followed up with an audit, to make sure that we went through the proper steps and we implemented the proper security measures in regards to making sure that we were logging events, we have proper IDS, IPS, these types of services that were offered in the PGN, where we typically host our web servers. So we had to prove that we had the security measures in place so not only to protect the environment, but the processes in place that we were bringing the data inside, making sure that it was encrypted, and we had everything in place, and it passed their requirements. So it was definitely, in the end, we actually had really glowing results from CTS. They thought we did a great job, and they thought that other state agencies could learn from what we did and how we approached the process. So overall, it was a very successful process.
Fantastic. And Mark, so with healthcare data, and also the Australian point of view, what objections did your security team, were they, I'm hoping that, obviously you've solved those, but I'm hoping there's similar themes here, because it seems like that education was a big tie-in. Did you have a similar experience?
I think from a security point of view, because I manage the team, similar objections going through our minds, but I think the one thing that we did realise early on was either we get on board now and try and build in security foundations from the ground up, or we're going to be, as usually what happens with security, you're playing catch up down the track and then trying to retrospectively apply security controls. So, we signed up, probably a good 12 to 18 months ago, and have been working with the infrastructure teams and risk and compliance teams and privacy as well to make sure that we've got the right controls in place now and then into the future as well. So it was sort of a little bit different. Normally I am a little bit of a no person, but in this case, we realised it is me. I am the no person. But we realised, look, if we don't get on board now, we're going to become irrelevant. Okay.
And Mauricio, your perspective, especially from being from the top as the CEO, what filtered up to that level from the security team?
Yeah, it was very interesting, because we talked with hundreds, maybe thousands of customers in Brazil about the concept of cloud computing. And think about 2009. Cloud computing was totally no sense. So it was very difficult for us to convince all those guys. And to tell you the truth, we don't realize the danger we are running, because we don't understand quite well this shared responsibility. It was not clear for us how far can we go with Amazon. I believe this is universal. So we started the first projects. We didn't realize that we have a big danger on the application, or even on the operating systems, without any security solution. So today for us is very difficult to consider moving a company to Amazon without a solution like yours. But in the beginning, was very difficult, because we don't have this concept. We believe that, if you are in Amazon, you are secure, you are safe and secure. Seems reasonable, okay? And then we realized that this is very much complicated than that. On the other hand, when we started to talk about Trend Micro, was wonderful, because we don't have to explain anything else. Mm-hmm. So we are talking about a company that is leader on the security solution. So for the customer, say, well, you are running Trend Micro in the cloud, so seems to be that you have all the stacks for security in general. But again, in the beginning, it was dramatic. I have to write a book about the first meetings with the people talking very strange questions about the cloud.
Yeah, and I think that comes down to, for those of you who aren't familiar with Daedalus' work, is they were very much one of the pioneers. So you can tell from, moving to people to AWS in 2009, a lot of what we take for granted today as far as the information available, the awareness around cloud, that wasn't established then. So for really to blaze that trail, it's a very different perspective as you pulled out for us. So that's very interesting to see common themes here tied as well, though, that initial perception of no, which is a bad security habit. We all love to say no, but then at least realizing the opportunity to get away from the smelly brown fields. So second question, very much tied to the first. How did your AWS project, and obviously you've deployed successfully, so we can say your successful AWS project, though if you have an unsuccessful one, we can learn from that too. How did that project change your internal policies? Did it change your policies? Aaron, do you want to kick us off?
Okay, I would go back to, we didn't really change our policies. We had to change the way we were protecting that environment in the outside. We had to, basically put forth those extra security measures. I'd mentioned the IDS, IPS, and logging, making sure that we had all those pieces in place that met the requirements from CTS. So I guess it was just for us, we had to really come up to make sure that we were in compliance with policies that were in place so that it could actually be an official product that we support and added into our official security plan.
Okay, right on. And Mark, what was your experience around policies? Did they change as you migrated?
Not really. I think the key thing for us is around data sovereignty, with Snowden, NSA, all those types of things, but even around certain types of data is traditionally not permissible outside the country. So that was probably the main thing for us. And fortunately, Amazon has their data centres in Sydney, so able to overcome those problems. But what we did, we actually applied very similar architectural models or patterns as we got internally, as we do out in Amazon. So we just see it as an extension. But we also use it as an opportunity to say, okay, well, what would we do different? And we're doing those things differently, and now we're looking to apply them back into our traditional gateway infrastructure as well, and our internal. So we're actually converging some of the technologies that we've now deployed in AWS with our other technologies that we have in our own data center. So,
okay.
So that's been very good to leverage some of those different technologies and being able to use those in AWS, trial them, make sure they work before we then push them out into our data centers.
Okay, so again, that theme of the policy didn't change so much as the implementation and the recognition that what you were doing still met your existing policy. So yeah. I'm going to go on a limb and say Mauricio is going to give me a bit of a different answer. Given the breadth of your clientele, have you seen their security policies changing as that's your core business, right? Is helping them modernize their infrastructures and moving to AWS. So how are your clients affected with security policy changes?
I would say that we can divide, we can split the market in two. In my case, I have to talk about my customers, right? So the SMB customers or the less mature companies, usually they don't have a CSO, they don't have a security guy. So usually the IT guy or the CIO in some cases, they are not prepared for that. So when we started to talk about managing services, including security as a service, for them was very nice because at that moment they realized that they have a great opportunity to have security as a service, low cost in the cloud. So we provide to them a safer opportunity, a safer solution than they have on-premise. For large companies, of course, they have their policies more well-structured, etc. So for those cases, we explain to them that we are expanding their policy to the cloud, seamless. So if you take, for instance, a customer that has Trend Micro, they can expand their console, they can expand their policies without any problem using our solution with Amazon. So for them was very important to have this vision because, the number one and number two difficulty to sell cloud computing is security. So when you explain that you are expanding the same policy for the cloud computing arena, so they are ready to go.
Okay. All right. There has to be a different answer from Texas.
No, well, they said bucko, I'm sure, a couple times, but no, they not really. No, I mean, our policies really didn't change. I mean, the one thing I might say is that you have to formally notify Amazon if you're going to do a pen test. You know, so now we had to add that checkbox in. Right? Okay. But otherwise, it's really not that different. Certainly, we saw in our policies the opportunity to change them. Take the opportunity. It's a different architecture. Why not do that? So a lot of what changed was more the tools, right? CloudWatch instead of whatever other tool you're watching within change management. So we don't, no real changes at all.
Okay.
Just kind of transfer.
Good. That's good. I appreciate the perspectives, and I'll admit I'm surprised by that. But I think that probably speaks to the strength of your existing policies. That a good policy is written to be somewhat technology agnostic, and as long as you can prove that the new environment meets it, so that's great. So our next question is around industry regulation. So you're all in very different industries. So let's come back to you, Jason. Energy sector heavily regulated.
It is. The major regulatory body is the Department of Transportation. And what's interesting is they look to a group called the American Pipeline Institute to kind of tell them what do we need to do, how do we manage the regulations around cybersecurity. And in this regard, it's absolutely the Wild West. The API says they subscribe to this idea of do your best and take care of it. And as a security professional, I was like, whoa, that's not all right. So we're looking at the Critical Infrastructure Act. Hopefully it eventually gets passed, and now we'll have to do something. So we're more keeping our fingers on the pulse of that regulation. But otherwise, it's a do your best, and it's more. If you talk to our customers, right, oil and gas companies, they're way more demanding than the regulatory bodies are.
Okay, and just to follow up on that, given how far sort of ahead conceptually your solution is, right? Like when I saw the information come across about what your project was trying to do with that real-time eventing and this sort of awareness, very cutting edge. It wasn't something I would associated with that. So do you have an opportunity to contribute back to those regulations based on the work you're doing?
Absolutely. We are part of a group called PHMSA, the Pipeline Hazardous Safety Materials Association, which is under the Department of Transportation, and we're sitting on the board to help drive some of those regulations forward, right? We understand if you see a natural gas pipeline, if you know where that's at, if Mark knows, do we want everybody to know where that's at? They explode. I don't know if you're aware, and that could be very bad. And if they go through a populated area, that's something we take very seriously. And safety is just one of our core beliefs. And really, in the energy infrastructure, everybody cares about security. Mauricio, you talk about cloud and security. We talk about safety above all else. And so we feel the need to help protect that data so that a foreign actor or anybody with some malicious intent couldn't get access to it. So we're helping drive the Department of Transportation into a better cybersecurity idea.
Excellent, right on. So also good tip, don't trust me with anything that explodes. And so Mark, with healthcare, what's the approach?
Unfortunately, we don't have something like HIPAA back at home. So the main one, well, for us is the Privacy Act. So they brought out an update to it early this year. But again, it's not very descriptive. It talks around reasonable steps. There's some guidelines provided around reasonable steps, but it's really left up to the individual organisations to decide on what reasonable steps are. The other one for us is PCI DSS because we accept a lot of credit card transactions. Okay. So PCI drives a lot of it as well. But even from that point of view, generally PCI is basically your foundation security controls as well. So they're the two big drivers for us. There is an overarching private health insurance body, and now they're being taken over by the bank regulator, APRA. So we might see some more stuff coming out of those guys. Okay. But other than that, we do some work with federal government agencies. So while we're a federal government-owned organisation, we don't have to comply with federal government security standards or their framework. but where we have relationships and doing business, or we're a partner of a federal government agency, in those instances we do. Okay. It's very similar to PCI, where you have your CDE, or we'll have a certain environment that is dedicated to that federal government agency. So we have to have a different level of security, potentially based on the classification of the data. So.
Okay. Right on. And I want to come back to that PCI in a second, but I know, Aaron, I'm going to go out on a limb and say, given with state government, you probably have some regulations and legislation that you have to respond to. But I could be completely wrong here, and you're in the free. But
you're completely right. Yeah, and it comes back to to be able to meet those CTS, the regulations that were put in place, the shared responsibilities model, where Amazon was able to provide the information via like a SOC 2 report to be able to show that they satisfied the physical requirements for security for the environment that this data lives in, and then it comes back to how we were able to implement the solutions. Not at first. A few years ago when we were looking at initially trying to have these types of solutions in place, we couldn't, the solution, we were trying to use it from a tool inside of our agency, and there were upstream firewalls that would keep us from able to even manage and lock those down. So luckily we were able to leverage a SaaS-based solution that was able to give us that functionality and meet those requirements. So that was extremely helpful, but there's definitely, there's quite a few regulations that you have to meet. And our security officer was very instrumental in assisting our team and working with the biologists and working with CTS and making sure that we met those requirements.
Excellent. And I find it interesting so far with the three responses. We haven't heard that anybody got an exception for anything, because that tends to be quite common as well if you can't meet that. So it's good news that you guys have met the requirements that you need to, though I think I've prompted a memory here.
Not on that. A different, something else.
Okay.
Not in relationship to this rollout, but for a backup solution that we recently implemented using another technology. But yeah, we did have to implement. There's a requirement that it has to be a 256 bit encryption, but it has to be a specific type of 256 bit encryption. But if it's not, you can have you can make an exception to that as long as the CIO agrees to it. So.
Okay. And so Mauricio, given the variety of clients that you have, do you have, so most common probably and relevant to the audience here, do you have PCI challenges with some of your clients or some equivalent of the local?
Yeah, so we have the same problems that you have, or the same challenges like PCI, HIPAA, et cetera. But we are in Brazil, so there are some local regulamentations from the government. There are few, because I believe that the local government in Brazil don't found out cloud computing so far, which is good. I don't know if is that someone. But
no tweeting that.
We are not dealing so much with the government in Brazil, but we are dealing with some verticals that has some limitations, like banks, for instance. Of course, the banks, they should maintain their data in Brazil. Is a old, vision of what is data, what is Brazil, what is what is a disk, etc. So for those guys, we try to explain, and we are very successful on that, to explain for a bank that, okay, this is for banking, or for the applications that you run for banking in general. But you have a lot of applications that runs on the web, generally speaking. So for those applications, we don't see any problem to be on the cloud. Actually, the best place to stay with your web applications is on the web. And it's safer for you because, so you are isolating those applications to the banking applications which are in your data center. So it's a speech, I don't know how deep this speech is, but they are buying this idea. So in general, in Brazil, we don't have regulamentations concerning data centers or data where they should stay or not, unless on banking, that I remember, and the government don't realize that so far. But we have the same problems like PCI, like HIPAA, etc. And PCI, we use part of the certification that we have from Amazon and also from Trend Micro. So and we have a special local consulting company that help us with PCI implementation. So we are safe for that.
Okay, great. So as you can see across the panel, diverse requirements, and they've all met them. Great takeaways, practical example of at least 2 companies that have met PCI compliance, which is always a common question of how you do it in this shared model, because you don't own everything. So you need to pull that all together in conjunction with AWS's controls. So next question, a little more on the ground. What approach did you take for day-to-day operations? So how did moving into AWS change the reality of day-to-day security in your organization? Let's start off, maybe Aaron, you want to provide some insight here?
Sure. And there's some challenges, no doubt, where the environment that we have out there is completely isolated. So we have a lot of data to move back and forth and a lot of different types of data for different species types. And so we came up with a solution where it's leveraging S3, and we're using a PowerShell provider by a company named Cloudberry to be able to write scripts and automate processes to transfer information using AWS IAM policies for specific accounts, so write-only access to an S3 bucket. And on the other side of that, we have automated batch processes that bring that data in with accounts, again, that only have read and transfer access rights. And that might sound simple, but there's about 20 of them that we had to put together and orchestrate and monitor and make sure that they're working properly. And then things such as Windows patches. That became, because we have Windows servers in that environment, sorry. But that was actually quite a challenge, because we had this environment where we had multiple layers where everything is locked down to only the web servers have access to the application servers, have access to the back-end data file servers. So how do you patch those systems? So that was a bit of a challenge. We came up with a solution where we basically had, we front-loaded a management server running with SUS in that environment that then delivered the updates to those systems and only opened up the firewall ports to allow those updates to go out. So there's definitely some challenges. We came up with some great solutions. Is there room for improvement? Absolutely. But yeah, it's definitely a work in progress. But so far we've been able to tackle the major issues, but there's definitely ways that we can still improve our processes.
Okay, so it sounds like you've duplicated some of your centralized services because you've got a hybrid environment, and then created a bit of some jump points to get data in and out. And as you're explaining that, I see Jason nodding the whole time.
Yeah.
So what's
data syncing from on-premise to it's tough, right? We've run into so many of the same problems. How do we get the data there? How do we do that efficiently? And because we were not in brownfield, we were very much a greenfield as we built this. I think we probably overdid some of our security practices to make it even difficult. So the guys in the operating the tools were like, how do I just need to get the shapefile up there, and how do I do that? So we over-architected, and you mentioned patching as well. Totally different, right? And we have had to decentralize because we're it's not hybrid, but they're not talking to each other. So how do we patch those systems effectively when half of them don't have access to the internet? And do we want to give them access to the internet? So yeah, we ran into the exact same trouble. It really didn't change our day-to-day operations as much as we had to figure that out, right? It was a new challenge, but really we've addressed it in all the same ways, right? Just, well, let's poke a hole when we need to and close it when we don't. But we over-architected the security behind it to make patching and deployment and then just getting data into the system, which is the whole point of the system. We made it probably more complex than it should be, but otherwise the day-to-day operations just continue on.
Okay. And with that additional work, are you trying to roll it back a bit and simplify?
A little bit. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. We need to simplify. I hate to tell the next question, but that's where we've seen the most simplification is how do we manage it when there's a problem? How do you manage it? Because it's very different in our world.
And Mark, day-to-day ops, big change, no change?
No, it has been a big change. I think the biggest challenge for us, though, is actually keeping up with all the different technologies, and that Amazon has released half a dozen or more different things the past couple of days. Some of the traditional vendors that we use don't necessarily have offerings in AWS as yet, but even just the sort of the traditional model where you've got that hard outer shell and that soft squishy center. Well, when we originally started with AWS, we didn't have many vendors that were running your traditional firewalls or your IPSs, and also I don't have control over the network per se. So that's actually had to change the way that we approach security. Doesn't change the way that we operate per se, but it changes the way that we've implemented security. So, you know, there's a lot more on the host as opposed to on the perimeter.
Yep.
Yeah, it just in overcoming things such as, you know, from a PCI point of view, you know, how do we review firewall rules when, you know, Knuckles and the security groups? Well, I've got an automated tool internally that helps me do that, but that doesn't integrate with the tool out in with AWS. So we now are working with some of our vendors in regards to doing closer integration with AWS. So, and that's been, I think, the biggest challenge for us is actually just getting some of our vendors across the board as well, because everyone's still learning about it. Amazon keeps changing the field, bringing new features in, which then means, okay, well, you can get access to logs now, which you 6 months ago couldn't get access to.
Yeah. So you haven't caught up with the 6 new services that they've announced in the last 2 days?
No, the guys are still asleep back at home as well.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough. And that tends to be a common theme when you talk to people who've deployed on AWS. Is keeping up with the pace is a challenge. So Mauricio, I'd be really curious to hear your experience on this, because you've been in business for so long and sort of seen so many different scenarios. How does it compare now when you've got your customers all in on AWS? What's the big shift operationally?
Well, for us, we are living a dream, because in the past, when we had a data center, we had a lot of people running into the racks, etc., doing everything, including security. Not only security, but also security. And the secret of our success today is that we automated everything. So we don't need to have people involved on managing or operating security, for instance. We have systems like Trend Micro, which is central for security for us. So that's how we manage the volume. Not only the volume, but also, I would say, the speed or the change, because our customers, they are changing all the time. So they are using Outscale, they are starting and stopping and doing everything else with their instances, and we have to help them while they are moving. So the only way we can do that without being crazy is to do automation. So for the operation, not only operation, but also deployment. Deployment is something very important for us. So the deployment, we create the EC2s, instances, or anything else, the RDS, etc., using a script that includes the agents of deep security from Trend Micro. So we try to start with the security and to manage this during the operation. That's crucial for us. I don't know how obvious this is for everybody here, but cloud computing is volume. So if you stay with a person or two trying to do something special, you are the bottleneck of a process that is much bigger. So you have to let it go and use automation to control. But without this automation, you are going crazy. Probably.
Okay. And so it seems to be a pretty similar theme to what Mark was saying. Where, you've gone automating everything. You're saying your challenge is tooling that isn't up to speed. And I think some of the announcements with the services we saw from AWS around code deployment and just code management are echoing that same type of theme. And it does definitely carry over to security, as you guys are explaining. So let's see what we've got next. So very similar sort of vein, but a little more urgent. So shared responsibility. AWS is running a good chunk of the infrastructure here. What impact has that had on your incident response plans? So Jason, do you want to lead us off?
Yeah. This one has been very profound for us, really. As any of us geeks here, we like to troubleshoot. It is fun. There's certain art to troubleshooting and looking towards solutions. But in the cloud world, what's the point? Just chuck it and start over, right? I mean, you've got the AMI, you got a snapshot of it and just reload it. So that this ability to just throw away and start over with a fresh, clean load is really changed our RTO. Right? Now we can just do it, right? Fail over, nobody notices, it's not a big deal. Why troubleshoot it at all? And I think that has absolutely been profound to us. It just works, right? Flip a switch, a couple clicks away, sometimes not even, if you've architected it properly, it just kind of fails over on its own. It lets you know, we loaded a new server for you, and you go, I wonder what was wrong with that. So our root cause analysis process has kind of gone away, right? I mean, because do we care?
Okay.
Let's keep it going. We certainly want to maintain that information to hopefully not have those failures, but they're not as impactful as they used to be.
Well, your production, you've been restoring your production, right? So does that mean your root cause analysis is a whole bunch of auto-scaling replaced it for me's?
Right.
Okay, so that's what you can pull off with a greenfield deployment.
Yes.
Mark, you mentioned brownfield, worse than
Stinky.
brownfield, smelly, stinky brownfield. That type of just throw it away and deploy a new one. Does that work for you, or what's your approach now in incident response?
Oh, look, it's actually been quite good coming here and seeing some of the early sessions around, and the whole concept around just disposing of it. Okay, well, it's broken, so just sort of dispose of it and then start up again. Whereas obviously the traditional model is, well, let's get in, pull it apart, find out what happened, what went wrong, and in the meantime you got a dozen people screaming at you to hurry up. So it's something that I'll be taking back home with and speaking to the team about, and the architecture group and what have you is around, okay, well, we have to actually we can now change the way that we approach it. I think there's still an important element of trying to identify the root cause, especially if you've been hacked or you've found something going on, a virus or whatever it might be. But I can take that offline and do my triage around that and then spin up one. And okay, it might get hacked again, but at least you're minimising the impact on our customers and our business as well. So being able to just pull out, investigate, spin up, at the drop of a hat, I think it's going to have a big impact. I think it'll eliminate a lot of the noise of the guys at the back. Get it up, get it up, get it up, while we focus our time and actually find out, well, what happened.
Okay. And Aaron, is that extra capacity or sort of near infinite capacity available away from a click? Has that enabled you guys to improve incident response?
Yeah, in a way, it definitely is a learning experience. When we had an incident, we had a problem. The ability, and we take regular snapshots, and we find out, wow, actually you can do more, with AWS than I can do with my on-site virtualization. I can spin up another instance and actually keep the instance that's having a problem, and I can actually isolate that to another network and keep it online or keep it separated so I can troubleshoot it while I get my production environment up and going. Now, that's one of my areas the process in place for that right now is semi-manual. That's one of the processes I actually hope to improve. There are ways and tools that you can actually automate that process that I've actually learned during this AWS conference. So I'm hoping to take some of the information I've learned to help automate some of those recovery processes. But still, even with the semi-manual process that we have in place, they're even more flexible than what we have for an internal recovery with like VMware that we have to a certain degree.
Okay. Right on. So we're running down on time here, so we'll pass the mic to Mauricio. And what I'd be curious is, what's your biggest win? Right, you're all in on AWS. You're a longtime AWS partner. What's the biggest win for your business, security-wise, moving into AWS?
I think is related to the incident response. I mean, when you have a crisis, like today, we have a crisis today. We have a vulnerability alert from Microsoft, Windows, etc. And we are acting totally different from the past. When I had a data center and we have an alert like that, we have to stop all the machines and install the patches, etc. It was almost impossible. And today, we just need to see what deep security is doing with virtual patch in this case. So we have probably more than 1,000 CPUs with Microsoft vulnerable to this new alert, and this is almost automated. So my people are monitoring that and communicating with the customer. Because, of course, we know we are not very good on communication on IT side, but this is crucial. I mean, we have to talk with the people. I mean, this is in some cases much more important than to solve the problem. Okay, so we announcing today to our customers a communication like this. Well, everything is okay. You are protected by this new vulnerability. So this is the greatest win. We have a safer life today because we don't have to do by ourselves. We have something like an expert of security into our cloud, which is the deep security. So we don't care about the complexities of the security. This is something that we manage, and that's it.
Okay. And Mark, biggest security win with AWS?
Oh, look, I think it's been able to build up something with security in mind from the ground up is the biggest win for us. And I think the other good thing is also being able to, with cloud or software as a service providers, is being able to actually chop and change technologies really quickly. We've been looking at web application firewalls, and with a simple DNS change, we're now using one. Whereas previously it would have taken weeks. I've got to provision space in the data center, I've got to get telco to patch it in, I've got to go through all these steps, and we made a DNS change and it's up and running.
Yeah, excellent. So speed of response, speed of change. Aaron, biggest security win?
I'd say come back to really similar. It's to Mark's. I mean, the tools that are out there, the technology we've put in place. That it's not only being able to log and actually have we get the alerting based on those logs that send out to multiple people, and the multiple people that can then respond. And we've taken the time to train multiple individuals on how to. Well, I say multiple individuals. So there's like 2 or 3 of us that can actually go through the process of being able to implement the new systems and recover from any type of incident.
Okay, excellent. Jason, same question.
Yeah, I think the bench depth, right? I don't have to employ 1,000 security engineers because they're a phone call away, and they're already acting on our behalf, as Mauricio said, right? I mean, they're just there, and they take care of it. They alert us. They let us know what's going on. So instead of me having to hire those people, find those people, you guys worry about that for us. And now we can focus on operations and focus on what can we do to further our product along and further our offerings along, instead of hiring pen test guys and hacking our own systems and doing those things.
Okay, excellent. So I want to thank you all very, very much. We appreciate you coming out. I want to thank our panelists, Mauricio, Aaron, Mark, Jason. Thank you very much. Hopefully their insight was valuable to you guys. I know I learned a lot here. I want to encourage you to fill in the evaluation. This was Security 314. You can go to the bit.ly link for AWS evals. Thank you for your time.